Hi, I'm Isla, and my author spotlight will deal with the works of H.G. Wells. H.G. Wells, or Herbert George Wells, was born on September 21st, 1866, in Bromley, Kent, England. Wells was born into a lower middle class family, and with his father owning a small shop and working as a cricket coach, and his mother working as a maid and housekeeper. Wells was deeply impacted by his financial upbringing, and this is reflected in the overreaching themes of his works that often bring in mentions of family, struggles, social status, the individual versus the group, and the concept of happiness. As for his education, Wells attended Thomas Morley's Commercial Academy in 1874, which is a private school. Given his family's financial situation, it seems odd for him to have attended a private school rather than a state school. However, his family placed an importance on Wells's education and wanted him to achieve an academic career. Interestingly enough, Wells mostly self-studied through libraries of the estates his mother was working at as a housekeeper. His mother was also a catalyst to developing Wells's education, pushing him into multiple apprenticeships, two of which were with drapers and one with a pharmacist. In 1883, he began a job as a teaching scholar at the Midhurst Grammar School, where his job relied on his ability to win government-sponsored scholarships. This pressure to become the best teacher possible is what led him to study more, and in 1884, at the age of 18, he ended up winning a scholarship to the Normal School of Science to study biology. What is interesting here is that he was a student under Thomas Henry Huxley, who was a prominent scientific figure. Huxley's theories correlated significantly with that of Charles Darwin in his advocacy of evolutionary theory and the concept of survival of the fittest. There was certainly an impact on Wells, since his works and publications carry significant themes of social survival and, in a sense, a social Darwinistic approach to his narratives. By 1890, he had graduated and achieved a Bachelor of Science degree from the University of London and had become a science teacher. In 1891, he married Isabel Mary Wells, but in 1894 he ran off with Amy Catherine Robbins, and by 1895 he had divorced Isabel and married Amy Catherine, whom he stayed together with until her death. Wells passed away on August 13th, 1946, in London, England, at the age of 79. These are a few of his publications. Wells' first book, published in 1893, was actually the textbook of biology. His first novel, however, was The Time Machine, published in 1895. This novel immediately grew in popularity after its publication, and I will go into further detail about the novel later. His other publications include The Wonderful Visit, The Island of Dr. Moreau, The Invisible Man, and The War of the Worlds, which will also be discussed later. He was involved in the Fabian Society, which also resulted in several works. One of the most important themes for Wells was the development of science fiction, or what was usually referred to as scientific romances. His knowledge of biology and education allowed him to produce worlds that could be feasible in a sense. With these, he was able to show his creativity in the possible technologies and advancements. Through these fictional worlds, he was able to create a social commentary about economic and social structures. Another part of publications dealt with his political views, specifically as a part of the British Socialist movement and the Fabian Society. As mentioned before, Wells experienced firsthand the unstable British class structure, and because of this was a critic of capitalism. But he eventually came to disagree with the methods of the Fabian Society, as they were sociologically theoretical. Wells believed in social action, in actually attempting to change the social system rather than simply critiquing it. He eventually came to leave the Fabian Society. His views are further elaborated in Kipps, published in 1905, and The Misery of Boots, published in 1906. Another important aspect of Wells's writings was his persistence for social change. He used science fiction and fictional worlds as a method to transcribe the issues that were occurring in his society. Specifically, Wells was an advocate for sexual freedom and exposed the gender bias. He opposed the conservative Victorian values and was interested in social progress. A work that reflects these views is the novel Anne Veronica, published in 1909, which has a heroine who had relations with her teacher. Wells in this novel criticizes the view that she should be punished due to her immoral behavior. So overall, Wells uses his novels as a way to establish a sense of social commentary. The Time Machine, published in 1895, was a key novel in the foundation of the science fiction genre, as well as considered the founder of the time travel subgenre. Like mentioned previously, this novel gained immense and immediate popularity once published and has had numerous film adaptations. The picture on the slide shows one of these film adaptations, the 1960 film version directed by George Paul. The main premise of the novel is that a nameless time traveler is shot into the year 802,701 by his invention. The world he finds has two types of people: the Eloi, which are described as small, frail, and peaceful; the second type being the Morlocks, who are ape-like and prey on the Eloi. Even here, stripping down the novel to its basic elements, we can see how Wells is providing a social and economic commentary that distinct two classes, one with major power and one without, and mimics Marxist theory of the bourgeoisie and proletariat. The foundation of this novel is essentially rooted in criticism of capitalism and class struggles. I would like to highlight an excerpt from this novel, derived from chapter 4. It reads, "Social triumphs, too, had been effected. I saw mankind housed in splendid shelters, gloriously clothed, and as yet I had found them engaged in no toil. There were no signs of struggle, neither social nor economical struggle. The shop, the advertisement, traffic, all that commerce which constitutes the body of our world was gone. It was natural on that golden evening that I should jump at the idea of a social paradise." The time traveler is speaking about the future. In this case, all needs are met for humans, a sort of paradise. But with this social paradise comes the abolition of capitalism. No longer are there advertisements, traffic, or commerce. The loss of capitalism is the inevitable future, which once again to me feels very Marxist, despite Wells being a socialist. But this focus on class, social, and economic issues are being portrayed through a science fiction lens. Wells uses this newfound genre as a method to criticize current social issues. The War of Worlds, published in 1898, is another one of Wells's science fiction novels. This book deals with the arrival of Martians on Earth, and in this excerpt, the reaction of humans to the aliens' arrival is spoken about. The excerpt describes the most extraordinary thing to my mind, of all the strange and wonderful things that happened upon that Friday, was the dovetailing of the commonplace habits of our social order with the first beginnings of a series of events that was to topple that social order headlong. If on Friday night you had taken a pair of compasses and drawn a circle with a radius of 5 miles round the Woking sand pits, I doubt if you would have had one human being outside it, unless it were some relation of Stent, or of the 3 or 4 cyclists or London people lying dead on the common, whose emotions or habits were at all affected by the newcomers. Many people had heard of the cylinder, of course, and talked about it in their leisure, but it certainly did not make the sensation that an ultimatum to Germany would have done. What is happening here is that there is a questioning of social hierarchy with the foreigners' arrival. The humans seem to not feel threatened at all by the Martians and act as they would normally do on a day-to-day basis. In the novel, the Martians even pose a threat by murdering citizens, but even so, there is no reaction. What Wells is highlighting here is the importance of social structure and the seeming need to uphold it. The social structures that govern us seem invisible, but ultimately dictate our survival. Wells holds a strong legacy as a novelist, journalist, and sociologist. being a pioneer of the world of science fiction and the use of it as a means for social commentary. Wells highlighted many issues surrounding society. His works were not just meant to brought by highlight issues brought by class and gender, but to urge a social reconstruction and the condemnation of capitalism. His various novels even paved the way for future dystopian novelists such as Aldous Huxley, George Orwell, and George Louis Borges. His works, just as unique as they are, surpass the novel and encompass the social views of their respective period. These are the sources I used, and thank you for watching.